I've carried her long enough. At some point you realize some children are just burdens. The words landed softly, like they were meant to be kind, but they cut deep.
People didn't gasp. They laughed.
Light, polite laughter filled the room, mixing with the soft music and clinking glasses. I stood 3 feet away from my mother. My hand held a glass of sparkling water, but I couldn't feel it anymore. My fingers tightened around it anyway, like it was the only thing keeping me standing. She didn't look at me. Not once. She smiled at the guests instead, like she had just said something clever. My chest felt tight. My throat burned. But I didn't cry. I just stood there, invisible in a room full of people. And somehow, that hurt more than the word itself, because it meant she truly believed it. I smiled. Not because I was okay, but because I refused to let anyone see me break. My lips curved, even though my chest felt like it was cracking open. My sister stood beside our mother, glowing under the attention. She placed a hand lightly on her arm and laughed. "Not everyone can keep up," she said, her tone soft but sharp. More laughter followed. I nodded like I agreed, like I was part of the joke. But inside, something twisted. I looked around the room. People avoided my eyes, pretending nothing had happened. That was when it hit me. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a joke gone too far. This was how they saw me. Not as someone struggling. Not as someone growing. Just a burden. And for the first time, I realized I had never been seen any other way. Burden. The word stayed in my head long after the music faded into the background. It echoed louder than anything else in that room. I didn't argue. I didn't speak. I didn't even look at her. Instead, I took a slow breath and stood still, because something inside me shifted. Not loudly, not suddenly, just quietly, like a door closing. I stopped waiting for her to understand me. I stopped hoping she would change. I stopped trying to prove anything to her. If she thought I was a burden, then I would let the world decide if she was right. Not with words, not with arguments, but with results. And for the first time in a long time, I felt calm, because I finally knew what I was going to do. My name is Abigail Turner. And that night, the night my mother called me a burden in front of everyone, was the last time I ever needed her approval. I didn't know it yet, but that moment would change everything. Because what she said wasn't new. She had just never said it out loud before. I had spent years trying to be enough. Quiet enough. Smart enough. Good enough. But no matter what I did, it never seemed to matter. Still, I kept going. I built something for myself, piece by piece. Not loud. Not flashy. Just steady. And while everyone else was busy judging me, I was working, planning, preparing. There was something I hadn't told anyone. Not my family. Not even most of my coworkers. Something big. Something that, if it worked, would change the way everyone saw me. Growing up, I was always the practical one. Not the favorite. Not the one people talked about with pride. Just the reliable one. If something needed to be done, I did it. If something went wrong, I fixed it. But no one celebrated that. My sister was different. She was bright, confident, and easy to admire. She didn't have to try hard to be noticed. I did. And even then, it wasn't enough. At family gatherings, I stayed in the background while she stood in the center. People asked about her plans, her dreams, her life. When it came to me, they smiled politely and moved on. I learned early not to expect much. Not from them. Not from anyone. So I stopped asking for attention and started focusing on something else. Something I could control. I chose corporate strategy. It wasn't exciting to most people. No spotlight. No applause. Just long hours, hard decisions, and quiet results. My mother called it safe. She said it like it was an insult. Like I had chosen something small because I couldn't handle anything bigger. But she didn't understand. Strategy wasn't about being seen. It was about making things happen behind the scenes. It was power without noise. And I was good at it. Very good. I worked late. I studied patterns. I solved problems others avoided. Slowly, people at work began to notice. Not in big ways. Just small signs. More responsibility. more trust, more important meetings. But at home, none of that mattered. To them, I was still the same, still invisible, still the burden. For 2 years, I had been working on something no one outside my team fully understood. A merger. Not just any deal. A massive one. The kind that could reshape an entire industry. Even inside the company, only a few people knew the full picture. And somehow, I was leading a key part of it. I didn't talk about it. Not because I wasn't proud, but because I knew no one would take it seriously. Especially not my family. To them, I worked a quiet job with no real impact. I let them believe that. Because explaining would take energy I didn't have. And I was saving that energy for something else. Something bigger. Because if this merger worked, it wouldn't just be success. It would be undeniable. That gala wasn't just a social event. It was filled with people connected to the deal. Investors. Executives. Decision makers. People who knew exactly what was at stake. Some of them knew me. Not well, but enough. Enough to understand what I was working on. Enough to respect it. That night, I noticed a few of them watching. Not with pity. With curiosity. They had seen what happened. They had heard my mother's words. And they were paying attention to how I reacted. I didn't make a scene. I didn't defend myself. I just stood there, calm. And I think that surprised them. Because in a room full of noise, silence can be louder than anything else. And that night, my silence said more than words ever could. The next Monday felt different. I walked into the office, expecting things to be normal. But they weren't. People looked at me longer than usual. Not in a bad way. Just different. More aware. In meetings, I noticed something new. When I spoke, people listened. Fully. No interruptions. No distractions. After one meeting, a senior executive stopped me. He gave me a small nod. "You handled that situation well," he said. I knew what he meant. The gala. I nodded back, keeping my voice steady. "Thank you." He studied me for a moment, then added, "Not everyone could do that." That was when it clicked. People had seen everything. Not just what was said, but how I carried myself. And now, they were watching even more closely. I didn't explain anything. I didn't tell my side of the story. I didn't try to change how people saw me. I let it sit. Let them wonder. Let them think. Because I understood something important. Respect isn't built through words. It's built through consistency. Through results.
Through time.
So, I focused on my work. I showed up early. I stayed late. I made decisions carefully. Every move had a purpose. Every step led somewhere. And slowly, I felt the shift. Not loud. Not obvious. But real. Because I knew something they didn't. Soon, there would be nothing left to question. No doubt. No confusion. Just one clear truth. And when that moment came, I wouldn't need to say anything at all. 2 weeks later, everything changed. I was called into a private meeting. 3 senior executives sat across from me. Their expressions were calm, but serious. One of them leaned forward. "We want you to take on more control," he said. My heart beat faster, but I kept my face still. More control meant more risk, more pressure, more visibility. "This isn't a promotion," he added. "It's a test." I nodded. "I understand." The room stayed quiet for a moment. Then he said, "If this works, it changes everything." I already knew that. That was why I accepted. "Okay," I said simply. No excitement. No hesitation. Just certainty. Because this was the moment I had been preparing for. And I wasn't going to waste it. At home, nothing changed. My mother acted like the gala never happened. Like her words didn't exist. She moved through the house with the same calm confidence. Talking about events.
Plans.
Appearances. I watched her quietly. Waiting. Not for an apology, but for any sign that she understood. There was none. Because in her mind, she had told the truth. And truth to her didn't need fixing. My sister followed her lead. Everything was normal. Too normal. Like I had imagined the whole thing. But I hadn't. I felt it every time I looked at them. That quiet distance. That unspoken line. And for once, I didn't try to cross it. My sister leaned into it.
Not openly.
Not cruelly. Just enough to remind me where I stood. Still keeping things small? She asked one evening. Her tone was light, almost playful. But I knew what it meant. I smiled. Something like that. She nodded, satisfied. Like she had confirmed something. Like she had placed me exactly where she believed I belonged. Limited. Predictable. Safe. I didn't correct her. I didn't argue. Because the truth didn't need to be explained. It just needed time. And I had plenty of that. So I let her think what she wanted. Let her believe she understood my life. Because soon, she would see it differently. Everyone would. The merger hit problems. Serious ones. Legal issues came up suddenly. Investors started asking hard questions. Doubt spread quickly. One wrong move could destroy everything. And suddenly, all eyes were on me. Every meeting felt heavier. Every decision carried more weight. I could feel the pressure building. Not just from others. From myself. Because this wasn't just about the company anymore. It was about everything. Everything I had worked for. Everything I had stayed silent for. I reviewed documents late into the night. Checked every detail. Looked for answers where others saw dead ends. And still, the risk remained. Because sometimes, no matter how careful you are, things can still fall apart. And I knew one thing for sure. If this failed, there would be no second chance. One night, I stayed in the office long after everyone left. The building was quiet. Just the soft hum of lights and distant city noise. I sat at my desk, staring at the numbers. Trying to make them make sense. Trying to find a solution. But all I felt was doubt. What if they were right? What if I wasn't enough? What if I failed and proved everything they believed about me? My hands tightened against the desk. My chest felt heavy. For a moment, I almost gave in. Almost accepted it. But then I remembered that night. The laughter. The word. Burden. And something inside me pushed back.
No.
I didn't come this far to prove them right. I took a deep breath. And started again. The solution came quietly. Not in a flash. Not in a moment of excitement. Just a clear idea forming slowly. Different. Risky. But possible. I looked at the structure again. Then I saw it. A way to rearrange everything. A new approach no one had suggested. Because it went against the usual rules. It was bold. Uncomfortable. But it worked. At least on paper. I knew what it meant. If I presented this, there would be no going back. It would either save the deal, or end my career. I didn't rush. I checked everything twice. Then again. And when I was sure, I prepared the proposal.
Calm.
Steady. Ready. Because this wasn't just a move. It was the move. Presentation day arrived. The room felt familiar. Large. Quiet. Serious. Executives sat around the table. Investors joined through screens. Every seat was filled. Every eye was watching. I stood at the front.
Calm on the outside.
Focused on the inside. I began to speak.
Clear. Direct.
No extra words. No hesitation. I walked them through the problem. Then the solution. Step by step. Every detail mattered. Every number had to make sense. The room stayed silent the entire time. No interruptions. No reactions. Just listening. When I finished, I paused. My hands rested lightly against the table. And I waited. Because this moment would decide everything. For a second, nothing happened. Then one investor leaned forward. I support this, he said. Another voice followed. And I agree. Then another. One by one, they spoke. Support. Approval. Confidence. The room shifted. What started as doubt turned into momentum. Questions came, but not to challenge. To understand. To move forward. I stood there, steady, answering calmly, watching everything change. Because just moments ago, this deal was close to collapse. And now, it was alive again. Stronger than before. And I realized something. This wasn't luck. This wasn't chance. This was earned. Every late night. Every quiet decision. Every moment I chose not to give up. It had all led to this, and it was working. After that day, everything moved fast. Meetings increased. Calls never stopped. Decisions had to be made quickly. But something was different.
People trusted me.
Not because they had to, because they chose to. I noticed it in small ways. They asked for my opinion first. They listened longer. They followed my lead. And outside the room, something else was happening. My name started coming up. At first, quietly. Then more often. Abigail Turner. Not with doubt. Not with question. With respect. It felt strange. Hearing my name like that. But I didn't react. I stayed focused. Because I knew this was only the beginning. The headlines came sooner than I expected. At first, small mentions. Short articles about the merger. Then bigger features. Detailed stories. Interviews. Analysis. And my name was there. Again and again. They called it bold.
Smart.
Unexpected. They talked about leadership, strategy, vision. I read it quietly. Not with excitement, but with clarity. Because this was what I had worked for. Not attention, not praise, but recognition that couldn't be ignored. The kind that speaks for itself. And suddenly, I wasn't invisible anymore. Not at work. Not anywhere. Because when the world starts repeating your name, people listen. And for the first time in my life, they were. Of course, my mother saw it. She followed those circles closely. The same people she tried to impress.
Were now talking about me.
Praising me. Sharing my name. I noticed the shift at home. The silence. The way she looked at me differently.
Not warm.
Not proud. Just unsure. Like she didn't know where I fit anymore. Because I wasn't the same person she had described. And she couldn't ignore it. Not when everyone else could see it clearly.
But she didn't say anything.
No questions. No comments. Just quiet observation. And that silence said more than anything else. Because for the first time, she didn't control the story. She never called me into a room. Never asked to talk. Never tried to explain.
Days passed.
Then weeks. And nothing changed. At first, I wondered if she would say something. Anything. But then I realized. She wouldn't. Because acknowledging it meant admitting she was wrong. And that was something she had never done. So she stayed silent. And I did too. Not out of anger. Not out of pride. But because there was nothing left to say. I had already moved forward. Already built something without her. And I didn't need her to understand it. Because understanding wasn't required. Results were. And those were already clear. A few weeks later, I received an invitation. A major event. Bigger than the gala. More important. More visible. They wanted me as a keynote speaker. I read the message twice. Then accepted. That night, I stood backstage. Listening to the quiet buzz of the crowd. The same kind of room. The same kind of people. But everything felt different. Because this time, I wasn't standing in the background. I wasn't watching. I was the one they came to hear. My name was announced. The lights shifted. And I stepped forward. Not nervous. Not unsure. Just ready. Because this moment wasn't given to me. I earned it. As I walked onto the stage, I saw familiar faces. Some from that night. Some who had heard everything. Some who remembered. But this time, no one laughed. No one looked away. They watched. Fully.
Carefully.
I stood at the center.
Took a breath. And began to speak.
Not about myself. Not about the past. Just the work. The process. The decisions. The lessons. Simple.
Clear. Real.
And as I spoke, I felt something shift again. Not in the room. In me. Because for the first time, I wasn't proving anything. I was just standing in what I had built. And that was enough. I never confronted my mother. I never corrected her. I never explained anything. Because I didn't need to. The world had already answered for me. Louder than I ever could. Clearer than any argument. And as the applause filled the room, I stood there quietly. Not overwhelmed. Not emotional. Just steady. Because I finally understood something. I was never the burden. I was just surrounded by people who couldn't see value unless it was obvious, unless it was loud, unless it was undeniable. And by the time it became that, I had already moved on, already built my own space, already found my own voice.
So I didn't look back.
Not even once, because I wasn't walking away in anger. I was walking forward in truth. And that was more than enough.